The sky above New Helsinki hadn't turned red. It had gone white. A thermal flash turned the colony's upper atmosphere into a boiling sheet of plasma, followed by the calculated sweep of fusion lances across infrastructure and life alike. Now, nothing moved but the slow drift of ash through magnetically thickened air. Human rescue teams stood ankle-deep in blackened mud, their hazmat suits crusted with the irradiated flakes of what had once been the colony's central plaza. A drone hovered, casting a wide-angle scan of the cratered buildings, those few that hadn't been completely vaporized. From one corner of the wreckage, a broadcast looped from a stolen Vorthax signal node. The Dominion's cold statement of purpose, repeated every 6 minutes in flawless Terran standard. Let this demonstration suffice. Your compliance will prevent further reclamation strikes. On a secure uplink buried beneath the Martian crust, Dr. Rylan Voss stared at that feed. Not the ash or the bodies or even the rubble, just the waveform of the message. He played it back again and again, isolating the modulation tones, analyzing the carrier signature. The image of New Helsinki's obliteration remained frozen on an adjacent monitor. It wasn't the first time he'd watched it. It wouldn't be the last. The small lab hummed with contained energy. Fluorescent lights cast harsh reflections across metal consoles and transparent composite walls, though the space felt more like a crypt than a research facility. Outside the main chamber, 10 meters of reinforced basalt and alloy plating sealed Project Eventide off from the rest of Olympus Station, itself hidden beneath Mars's western hemisphere. Security was so tight, not even the Terran High Council knew exactly what he was building, which suited Voss just fine. He hadn't been anyone's favorite since his removal from the Quantum Energy Council 7 years earlier. Irreversible theory contamination, they'd called it. Yet here he was. "You look like hell," said Kess from the doorway, her voice distorted slightly through the decontamination shield. "I've been watching the Vorthax redefine extinction parameters," Voss muttered, not turning from the monitors. "It's educational. You could sleep. Or shower." Sleep didn't save New Helsinki. Kess stepped inside and tossed a protein bar onto the console beside him. "You keep chasing ghosts and eventually you forget the living need you more." Voss didn't answer. He rewound the footage again. Not the standard public feeds, but raw sensor data smuggled from the colony's backup cores. Frame by frame, he tracked the exact moment the Dominion's dreadnoughts dropped out of superlight. They had appeared in precise formation, symmetrical, unemotional. Each ship's energy signature shielded by phase distortion fields. Standard Earth kinetic batteries had fired in response, but the rounds simply scattered like marbles tossed at a wall of rippling glass. Shield harmonics remained stable even under sustained bombardment, Voss murmured, adjusting one of the simulation parameters. Not even a flicker. "And our best missiles? They never made it through. Vaporized 5 kilometers out." Kess leaned in, squinting at one of the gravity wave graphs. "They didn't even use full plasma saturation, did they?" "No," Voss said quietly. "They were efficient, surgical. It was a message." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft clicks of quantum drive simulators spooling up in the background. "You're looking for a way to counter the shields," Kess said finally. "No," Voss replied, "I'm looking for a way to ignore them." She frowned. "What does that even mean?" He stood and walked across the room to a chamber lined with thick alloyed plating. Inside sat a device about the size of a refrigerator, wires and superconductors spilling from its sides. It looked unfinished, because it was. Voss hadn't activated it fully since the prototype stage, mostly due to power concerns and partially due to the possibility of spatial detonation. "Back in Zurich, we theorized that quantum entanglement fields could anchor macro-scale particles in relative phase delay," he said. "In other words, teleportation. Not across vast distances, not like the movies, but short-range, controlled displacement." Kess folded her arms. "We were told that wouldn't scale." Vosh tapped the console beside the core with 2 fingers, then pointed at a tungsten cylinder suspended in the test chamber behind thick shielding glass. Well, Zurich was working with lab-grade particles. I'm working with real-world problems. He entered a code. The lights dimmed as the displacement chamber's capacitors whined to life, charging the field lattice. A deep, thrumming sound began to echo through the lab, the kind that hit not your ears, but your bones. "You're actually going to run it?" Cass asked, taking a step back. "No more simulations." Static rippled across the monitor, followed by a flare of deep blue energy arcing between the field pylons. The tungsten cylinder shimmered, twisted, and then gone. A sharp thud echoed from the secondary wall, exactly 534 meters away. A new camera feed flicked on, revealing the cylinder embedded half through a blast shield on the far side of the secondary containment area. Kess blinked. Voss stared at the impact site. "You moved it," she whispered. "You moved it through reinforced bulkhead and 20 centimeters of vacuum-layered steel. No shielding, no resistance, just displacement." He looked pale now, like a man who had seen something he wasn't ready to believe, or perhaps something he always believed, but never expected to work. "What happens when that isn't tungsten?" Kess asked. Voss didn't look away from the feed. "Then it's warships." She reached for the emergency kill switch out of instinct, her hands trembling. "This isn't a weapon, Ryland. This is goddamned black magic. How the hell do you aim this without scrambling a crew's atoms across 10 cubic kilometers of space?" "I don't know yet," Voss admitted. Kess exhaled sharply. "That's comforting." But Voss didn't share her panic. His mind was already running probabilities, calculating orbital trajectories, estimating the mass energy requirements to scale the device by a factor of 10,000. The shielding on Vorthak's dreadnoughts was irrelevant now. Not because it could be pierced, but because it could be ignored entirely. If space itself became a variable, everything changed. He leaned closer to the console, voice low. "We can't beat their fleet," he said, "but we can make it disappear." And for the first time since New Helsinki turned to ash, he allowed himself to hope. Not for peace, not for victory, but for relevance. The kind that made empires shudder. The war room beneath Olympus Mons pulsed with tension, thick, hot, and unspoken. The kind of air no ventilation system could clear. Colonel Mark Ivor stood at the center of the chamber, arms folded tight across his chest, watching the projection feed of the Vortex fleet slowly advance across the Martian orbital path. Each red marker on the display represented a dreadnought-class vessel, surrounded by escort cruisers and atmospheric plasma carriers. It looked less like a military formation and more like a wall of inevitability. He turned to the figure pacing near the lower console bank, Dr. Rylon Voss, voice already hoarse from 3 straight hours of argument. "I'm not saying it's safe," Voss said, gesturing at the power distribution model flickering across his tablet. "I'm saying it's the only thing that's going to work." "And if it fails?" Ivers asked, tone cold. "If it collapses the displacement field? You've said yourself the math is exact, until it isn't." "If it fails," Voss answered without blinking, "then we get to watch the Martian colonies burn from orbit, and my career ends 10 seconds before my life does. Your choice." Yves didn't reply immediately. Around them, officers exchanged silent glances, waiting. No one wanted to be the one who gave approval, yet everyone in the room knew this had already gone past negotiation. Mars was the last forward bastion between Earth and the expanding Vorthax incursion line. Lose it, and the defense grid shatters. "Coordinates are locked?" Ivers finally asked. Boss nodded. "We've mapped the gravity wells between Phobos and Olympus Mons. The displacement net is aligned along their curvature. If they enter the corridor, they're in range. And the sun? Calibrated. We're not just moving mass, we're threading it through space-time geometry. You'll get your fireball." A beat passed. "Activate Eventide," Ivers ordered. Within minutes, the primary uplink to the core reactor spiked with charge, and the displacement lattice began pulsing under the surface of the volcano. Below the command center, in a silo bored through 6 kilometers of Martian stone, Eventide's generator array powered up. Cascading coils spinning at relativistic speed, synchronizing a field so unstable the test models had only predicted success with a ±2% margin of survivability. Kess stood by the field harmonics console, her hands trembling slightly as readouts surged. We're already at 94% capacity. The sun's gravitational signature is causing ambient noise in the phase matrix. Voss adjusted the calibration manually, fingers dancing over the control surface. Compensate with phased jitter. They're using linear entry, predictable approach angles. Give me 5 seconds of window. Done, she replied, but after that the field destabilizes. 5 seconds is all we'll need. Up above, the Martian sky bloomed with movement. The Vorthax fleet broke the horizon like a slow metallic wave, dark against the faint glimmer of atmosphere. Their dreadnoughts led the charge, long hulls glowing with internal plasma circulators, shield matrices refracting ambient solar light like bending glass. To Earth's battered defense systems, it must have looked like Armageddon with a budget. From the Olympus uplink tower, a Terran relay station began broadcasting a tactical withdrawal signal, a trap disguised as a retreat. It worked. The Vorthax took the bait. They descended as predicted, their formation closing into a compression wedge as they moved toward the Olympus basin, straight into the calibrated corridor. Voss's voice cracked across the command channel. Trigger on my mark. 3, 2, 1, fire! There was no explosion, not in the way anyone had expected. The displacement event didn't erupt, it unfolded. Reality bent inward, like fabric sucked into a vacuum, around 6 central dreadnoughts. Their outlines shimmered, twisted, then stretched unnaturally, hulls warping like liquid around invisible spindles. Gravitational aftershocks rippled across Martian orbit, enough to knock 2 satellites into emergency shutdown and trigger magnetic storms in Phobos's crust. A low-frequency hum fluttered the chamber so deep it rattled teeth. Officers clutched their consoles. One lieutenant vomited into her sleeve. The Vorthax vessels didn't burn. They vanished, instantly and completely, as if erased by the universe's own hand. Then came the silence. Not mechanical silence, but a void, the kind that follows cathedral bells or deathbed heart monitors, the kind that carried weight. Kess was the first to speak. Telemetry confirms it. Displacement successful. Solar impact. Registering flare intensity at level 7. We put 6 dreadnoughts into the sun. Voss sat back slowly in his chair. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. His fingers hovered over the screen, as if afraid to touch the data, afraid it might dissipate like fog under light. Colonel Evis looked at him. "Goddamn," he said quietly. "You actually did it." Voss nodded faintly, but his eyes stayed locked on the orbital scans. The Vortex fleet had splintered, ships scattering in chaotic vectors. No retaliation, no coordinated counterstrike. They had come expecting a final blow, and instead walked into an empty kill box. One that rewrote everything they understood about warfare. "I didn't expect them to vanish like that," Kess murmured. "No debris, no scream, just gone." Voss exhaled slowly. "That's what happens when you use the universe as a scalpel." She looked at him then, not with admiration, but something closer to concern. "We just rewrote the rules of war." He didn't turn. He simply said, low and bitter, "No, we broke them." And far above them, on the edge of space, the Vorthax regrouped, leaderless, confused, and newly afraid. The surviving Vorthax vessels drifted in formation, or what was left of one. The tight structure that had once screamed precision now looked scattered, fragmented. Some cruisers spun too fast on their own axis, their navigation systems attempting, failing, to account for gravitational turbulence. that shouldn't have existed. A few smaller frigates powered down entirely, their AI cores locked in diagnostic spirals as they tried to reconcile the unthinkable. The complete disappearance of 6 capital dreadnoughts without a single kinetic trace. Aboard the Verectal, the Dominion fleet's temporary command ship, its overseer relayed a burst of orders, but the signal came back fractured. Com traffic from Allied ships was unstable, looped with corrupted data fragments. The subspace relay echoed the last clean recording, distorted and raw. The field collapsed around us. I didn't see anything. It cut out there. No explosion, no final scream, just a break in transmission, as if reality had severed the line. By Vorthak standards, this was chaos. And chaos traveled fast. Panic slithered across the Dominion's command networks, not through fear alone, but confusion. The Central Fleet AI, the command matrix known as Ethar Prime, refused to update tactical parameters. Unknown loss condition, it repeated across the broadcast spectrum. Tactical failure exceeds predictive modeling, rerouting strategic computation. Worse still, isolated vessels began broadcasting to each other without encryption, an unheard-of breach of protocol. Ships begged for answers from command, from science divisions, from other sectors. The Vorthaks were not used to unexplained losses. They were not built for ambiguity. 6 dreadnoughts, gone. No wreckage, no radiation bloom consistent with detonation, just absence. And when absence couldn't be explained, someone had to pay for it. The Dominion High Conclave convened 2 planetary cycles later in the deep orbit chamber around Threxia Prime. 6 of the 12 warlords arrived in person, their warskins glistening with biofilm and ceremonial armor humming with gravitational nullifiers. The rest sent diplomatic surrogates or high-caste science liaisons. The atmosphere inside the conclave was thick with hostility, not toward the humans, but toward one another. This was sabotage, hissed Warlord Veshtar of the Third Vector. Internal error from Ethar Prime's data core. We should dismantle the AI and conduct a root layer diagnostic before leaping to conclusions. It was not sabotage, countered Relathi, science regent of the 4th spiral. Her crest trembled, a clear sign of frustration. No trace of quantum bleed, no harmonic weapon signatures. This wasn't destruction, this was removal. A third voice, deeper and gravel-thick, cut through the room. Removal? Snarled High Warlord Jurax. What force removes dreadnoughts the size of small cities without leaving molecular vapor? Relathi's answer came cold and calculated. Only one that doesn't need to collide. That silenced the chamber. Jurax bared his fangs. If Earth has discovered such a weapon, then their restraint until now was deception. We offered mercy. You offered extinction to a species that survived asteroid winters, oxygen famine, and bioweapon civil wars, Relathi replied. What part of their history told you they would submit? The debate turned to shouting, languages overlapping, translators struggling to keep up. In the end, a consensus formed, not of agreement, but of hatred. Retaliation was required, an immediate show of dominance. Above Earth's grey-scarred moon, Dominion warships decloaked in synchronized arcs. No warning, no parley, no claim. Despite all efforts, plasma lances stabbed into lunar surface, carving white-hot trenches across settlements and science outposts. The Armstrong refuge was the first to go. Its low dome cracked open like an egg, ejecting debris and bodies into open space. The Antares mining ring followed moments later, its orbital tether slashed clean. The moon's surface fractured in silence, but on Earth, seismic monitors screamed. Colonel Ivers stood in the underground war room at Olympus Mons, staring at the feed in grim silence. He didn't look away, even as the second colony that Harmony Vale was incinerated. They're sending a message, he said flatly. They want us to know that even our victories have costs. Across the room, Voss entered, his face shadowed by sleeplessness and deep calculation. "It's not just revenge," he said. "It's a probe." Ivers glanced at him. "What?" Boss stepped forward, tapping his pad against the central holotable. "They're measuring our response, trying to provoke us into using the weapon again. They want another data point." Ivers rubbed his jaw. "Then why not hit Earth directly?" "It's because they think we'll flinch first." The silence returned. "Are they wrong?" Ivers asked. Voss didn't answer. The Terran Military Council met in secret, far below Arctic Command. Generals, intelligence chiefs, and planetary defense strategists debated how to proceed. Deploy the weapon again? Risk destabilizing another orbital corridor? How many times could they pull the trigger before the cost became too steep? Boss stood before them and said 3 words that changed the conversation. "They're learning now." It projected a captured Dominion broadcast, recently intercepted by the stealth array at Europa Relay. It wasn't in any known language, but the mathematical symbols were universal. Orbital arcs, gravitational stress vectors, quantum harmonic predictions. They were reverse engineering the eventide effect. "They've started calculating leyline curvature," Voss continued. "They're mapping where we can and can't fire. That means they're no longer reacting. They're planning." One admiral leaned forward. "You're saying they're adapting?" "I'm saying this isn't about brute force anymore. They're treating the war like an experiment, and we're the variable they can't define. That makes us more dangerous than we've ever been, but it also makes us their top priority." Later that night, in the silence of the Olympus Command Center, Ivers and Voss stood alone. Voss brought up a new intercept, an unshielded Vorthax fleet order broadcast from a distant theater. The data logs confirmed it. Advanced fleet movements had shifted. The Dominion was rerouting their carriers around gravitational anomalies and stellar mass zones, not to avoid terrain, but to avoid displacement corridors. "They're recalibrating," Ivers muttered. "They understand the rules now," Voss said. "Or think they do." Eva scrolled through the translated logs, eyes narrowing. "What's this?" Voss leaned in. "It's a list of gravitational ley lines across the inner system, each one marked with probability risk zones. Let me guess. Mars is glowing red." Voss nodded slowly. "They're building a new strategy, one that keeps them just out of reach." Ivers turned to him. "Then what do we do?" "We stop giving them patterns," Voss replied, voice low, "and start giving them ghosts." The screen flickered again. The Vorthax weren't running. They were recalculating. The Vorthax were many things: strategic, relentless, hierarchically obedient, but they were not immune to fear. That much was becoming clear in the weeks following the eventide strike. Their comms still pulsed across the void, encrypted but not silent, and in those broken bursts of intercepted language, Voss found something far more useful than targets. He found uncertainty between phrases, mathematical inconsistencies in fleet coordination, redundant cross-checks on basic subspace scans, entire squadrons rerouted to avoid regions that had no strategic value. Except for their gravitational curvature, "They're chasing ghosts," Kess said, scrolling through the latest decrypt. "One fleet just did a full-burn retreat from a dead asteroid field. No radiation, no weapons fire, not even debris. They jumped because one ship thought it saw a distortion pulse." Boss stood beside her, arms crossed, the overhead lights flickering slightly as Eventide's mainframe cycled its ambient processes. "Thought," he repeated, almost like a prayer. "That's all it takes now." He turned away from the screen and brought up a new interface, one they hadn't touched since before the first strike. It was a simulation platform built to model predictive eventide discharges. Originally designed for calibration, now it had a different purpose. "I want this linked to our signal repeaters across the belt," he said. "Overlay displacement signatures into their patrol zones, just subtle enough to trigger scans, not alarm." Cass blinked. "You want to fake firings?" "Exactly. Let's make them believe we've got dozens of these things, mounted on ships, satellites, maybe even lunar bases. She gave him a wary look. You're not just playing with shadows now, you're building an army of phantoms. Voss met her gaze evenly. I don't need to destroy their fleets, I just need their captains to think they're already doomed. Within hours, the uplinks hummed to life. From hidden satellites in the Kuiper Belt to signal spires embedded in decommissioned mining stations, Earth's BlackNet broadcast fake quantum ripple bursts across Vorthax-controlled sectors. The pattern was irregular, randomized. No rhythm, no sequence, pure chaos designed to mimic malfunctioning displacement energy signatures. And it worked faster than Voss expected. Aboard the Vorthax cruiser Sarkel, deep within the Galtris sector, alarms blared, not from physical damage, but from data anomalies. The ship's AI reported phase distortion near the dorsal sensor array, an echo consistent with the human weapon's activation. The bridge lit up with warning sigils, and Captain Uret snapped to alert status. Shield harmonics up, defensive posture, he ordered, evasive roll, prepare counterlance spread. The crew obeyed instantly. Protocol demanded immediate retaliation to any displacement pattern. They launched a barrage of plasma bolts into open space, striking nothing. After several long moments, the scanners showed no sign of a breach. The area was empty. But still, the pulse had been there, hadn't it? Run full diagnostics, Uret ordered. The junior officer hesitated. Commander, there's no core fluctuation, no spatial shear. It might have been a false... You dare question threat protocol? The captain barked. Do you know what happens if we hesitate and the humans strike again? The officer stiffened. No, sir. You die. That's what happens. That same week, 7 Vorthax vessels across 3 systems initiated evasive maneuvers. One opened fire on a civilian transport after misidentifying its hull distortion as a phase anchor. Another vessel jettisoned its power core preemptively. The Dominion's AI command structures began flagging erratic behavior in its subfleets, demanding more oversight, resulting in greater delay, more fragmentation. Voss read the reports with grim satisfaction. They're starting to anticipate things that never happen, he told Kess. And worse, they're punishing their own for failing to. She frowned. Speaking of punishment, Voss looked up. We've got visual confirmation of a Vorthax tribunal on the outpost at Delta 13. A junior command officer was executed for ignoring a displacement anomaly during a routine patrol. No actual eventide trigger. He just didn't fire fast enough at empty space. Voss stared at her, unmoved. Then it's working. Kess stood slowly. This isn't strategy anymore. It's psychological warfare. It's always been psychological, Voss said. We were just late to the game. The Vorthax tried to erase our colonies to provoke surrender. We're just speaking their language now. She walked away without answering, but didn't deactivate the array, not yet. Meanwhile, on Earth, the political fallout had begun to ripple. In a sealed chamber beneath Geneva's surviving administrative sector, the Terran Civil Council convened to review Eventide's ongoing use. The Secretary of Ethics, flanked by philosophers, generals, and AI moral advisors, brought the matter to vote. Was false deployment designed to provoke fear and paranoia still within the bounds of wartime conduct? It doesn't kill, Voice testified, appearing via secure uplink. It doesn't wound. It causes uncertainty, and uncertainty in this war is more effective than plasma. One of the councillors leaned forward. You mean fear? Voss didn't blink. Yes, fear is more efficient than firepower. The vote passed, narrowly. Eventide's new protocol was approved, simulated displacement warfare. And so the first true broadcast was launched. A small, aging Terran corvette, long since decommissioned, was pulled from reserve orbit and fitted with a singular mission: stage a public vanishing. Its comms were opened, the feed encrypted just enough to let the Vorthax crack it with effort. The ship's captain read, "False telemetry allowed." The vessel hovered above an asteroid belt. "This is ISS Karvek, beginning experimental jump test. Displacement field aligned. Engaging in 3, 2... The countdown never finished. Voss cut the signal at exactly 0.8 seconds after the jump. From the Vorthax perspective, the ship disappeared mid-sentence. And that silence traveled faster than light. By the third cycle after the Mars event, Earth's Black Ops division had repurposed nearly every orbital junk satellite and reserve scout drone it could get its hands on. Voss oversaw the operation personally, though he rarely left the subterranean nerve center beneath Olympus Mons. His eyes were on the map, always the map, watching lines of engagement change, not by fire, but by fear. He called it phase mirage. To the Terran brass it was just another tactic, but to Voss it was art. The mission parameters were simple: saturate Vorthax-controlled space with signal interference, fake eventide energy signatures, and visual disinformation. Where physical displacement was impossible, the illusion of it would suffice. Every ghost the Vorthax saw would be a calculated lie. Kess tapped into the fleet uplink from the Europa array. "We've got stealth drones in position across Glintar sector. Probes are mimicking eventide harmonic bleed. Trigger the distortion relay at 400 orbital," Voss said without looking up. "Let them see a ripple and nothing else. And when they scan for impact, let them scan. It'll tell them nothing, and that's worse." On the bridge of the Hakvos, a Dominion destroyer operating in a relatively calm stretch of space, Captain Saloon paced the length of the viewing deck. For cycles, his squadron had patrolled this sector without incident. Until now. The junior sensor tech stood abruptly. Quantum spike detected on the starboard ridge, range 2 clicks. Sarno's crest stiffened. "Visual confirmation. None, Commander, but signature aligns with prior eventide resonance. High confidence." He didn't hesitate. "L batteries. Open fire." Lance bursts erupted from the Hakvos's forward cannons, slicing through the black. A support cruiser, Valkesh, caught the brunt of it, its hull shredded by friendly fire before it could evade. The cruiser never had a chance to respond. Its systems went dark. No eventide, no threat, only the ghost of a ripple and an overeager gunner. Within minutes, the destroyer's second officer launched a formal protest. The crew fractured along factional lines. Some convinced the captain had acted correctly, others calling for his immediate removal. The bridge descended into chaos. Commands were shouted, then countermanded. A mutiny began, not with weapons, but with doubt. Back on Mars, Voss watched the aftermath unfold through intercepted Vorthax security feeds. "They're unraveling," Kess said. "We didn't fire a single shot." "We didn't have to," Voss replied. "They've started doing it for us." He pivoted to a different console. "Prepare the Cerberus for jump." "The cruiser?" Kess raised a brow. "She hasn't flown in years. You want her to be a ghost too?" "Not a ghost," Voss said. "A martyr." The Cerberus was fitted with a jump drive, modified to displace the vessel to a barren star system designated Epsilon R8, a dead region light-years from Dominion control. The crew, selected from Earth Special Operations, knew the risks. Voss explained at once, clearly. "You won't be destroyed, but you won't be returning either. Once you're displaced, your comms go silent. If they so much as ping a signal trace, the illusion fails. You'll live in shadows until we call you home. If we call you home." The captain nodded. "Understood. Ghost protocol." The broadcast was crafted carefully. It began with a secure Vorthax code leak, planted where they were certain Dominion analysts would find it, a hacked Terran uplink. The feed was intentionally grainy, distorted, too convenient to ignore. The footage showed the Cerberus hovering above a low-orbit planetoid. Calm, quiet. Then came the build-up, crew reporting energy anomalies, hull tremors, spatial lensing, classic eventide signatures. And then the disappearance. From the Vorthax perspective, the ship flickered, a shimmer of warped light, and vanished mid-transmission. No explosion, no exit vector. Just gone. The feed cut out a half-second later. It was enough. The psychological effect across the Dominion was immediate. Broadcasts from regional fleets flooded the command net, panicked calls for verification, orders for full fleet recalibration, emergency redeployments. Entire sectors entered lockdown, not because they were under attack, but because they couldn't prove they weren't. Boss pulled up new logs from Vorthax Command, a shattered mess of rerouted orders and conflicting protocols. Command verification priority 1 repeated endlessly across nodes. Dozens of commanders began ignoring central authority, improvising defense patterns, refusing standard directives. "They're breaking chain of command," Cass said, eyes wide. "No," Vogt said softly, eyes cold. "They're breaking faith." A week later, the final crack showed itself. Warlord Narsix, commanding the Dominion's 9th strategic column, stood alone on the bridge of his dreadnought. The channel to Ethar Prime, the AI command nexus, remained silent. His sub-commanders had either gone rogue or retreated beyond signal range. No answers, no structure, no gods. He screamed into the void of the Dominion's last functional relay, his voice hoarse and ragged. What kind of enemy refuses to fight? His only answer was static. And behind that, silence. Calculated, human silence. The Dominion High Conclave was no longer a council, it was a war zone without weapons. Seated in fractured quorum across a holographic dais that spanned 10 worlds, the Empire's most powerful warlords, strategists, and techno-theologians now shouted over one another like panicked civilians. Warlord Durex, crimson-plated and glowering, slammed a clawed hand onto the projection podium. "You propose surrender after a single human weapon undoes our legacy? Other 36 phantom strikes, 7 lost fleets, and a command hierarchy in ruins, yes," snapped Regent Vralis. Her voice filtered through neural amplification. "They're dismantling us without direct confrontation. We have no defense against shadows." "Then we escalate," growled another warlord from the periphery conquest arm. "Deploy unregulated drives, crack open the gravity wells of their system, collapse their sun if we must." A stunned silence followed, broken only by the subtle rasp of a translation buffer resetting. Rilith, science regent of the 4th Spiral, spoke last. "You've all misunderstood. This isn't about military loss. This is epistemological warfare. They've made truth a liability. Our soldiers can no longer trust their own eyes. Our captains don't obey because they don't know what to obey." Her statement hit with more weight than any missile. And while the Conclave bickered, outside their sphere of power, the Dominion began to crack. The Atrexian coalition was the first to break ranks. Long considered a subjugated vassal species under Dominion control, they had maintained forced loyalty through fear of orbital bombardment. But when Earth's phantom displacement network appeared over Atrexian territory, entirely faked, of course, the coalition read the message clearly. The humans don't need to kill to dominate. Within days, the Atrexians severed their communications tether from Vorthax Command and issued a universal broadcast. "We are no longer afraid of monsters who can't even face their ghosts." Several smaller client species followed suit, either defecting outright or ceasing cooperation with Central Command. Shipments failed, supply chains broke, the Vorthax military machine began to grind with a dry, screeching slowness. Worse yet, rumors spread, not from humans, but from within. Stories of Dominion warships disappearing mid-warp, entire fleets swallowed by silence, captains executing their own crews to prevent quantum infection. No 2 reports were the same, but all of them were believed. In desperation, Admiral Shexvosin of the Dominion's Fifth Arm, the last loyalist still controlling a full planetary system, authorized a retaliatory strike of unprecedented scale. Having captured fragments of Earth's eventide schematics from a derelict probe, he ordered his technomancers to reverse-engineer a crude version of the displacement weapon. Target: Caltris, a Vortex city moon of 10 million. Intended result: full teleportation of the planetoid to the edge of Sol's system, where it would reappear as a declaration of Dominion dominance. Actual result: catastrophic failure. The displacement core, unstable, misaligned, activated without proper field harmonics. Instead of teleportation, the planetoid's internal mass collapsed inward for 0.2 seconds, enough to initiate an artificial gravity implosion. Caltris tore itself apart mid-orbit, sending half of its debris into its parent gas giant. The rest spread across the sector as a glittering field of irradiated corpses and alloy splinters. The Dominion lost 10 million citizens, a key industrial hub, and any lingering illusion of control. On Earth, the intelligence report came via Europa's long-range taps. Colonel Ivers read the data aloud, voice steady. Caltris is gone. No survivors. No transport signals. The Admiral's last words were broadcast unencrypted. He tapped the console. A garbled voice echoed in the room. We tried to mimic them, but the void doesn't answer to us. Voss sat quietly, hands steepled. Kess entered the chamber moments later, her face drawn and pale. You saw the feed, she asked. Voss nodded. They destroyed their own city trying to copy your weapon. They didn't understand it, he replied. No, she said. They didn't understand you. Voss turned to her then. There was no smugness in his face, only a cold acceptance. This won't stop, she whispered. You created a ghost they can't kill. He looked down at the table, then up at the flickering projection of a dying Vortex system. That's the point. They never knew how to win peace. Reports continued to pour in. 5 Vortex sectors were in open revolt. Commanders stopped answering central orders. Some executed their communication officers to prevent infiltration. Others fled into deep space, turning their dreadnoughts into silent tombs. What the weapon didn't destroy, belief did. And it wasn't just the Dominion that noticed. The Bravari Intersect, a once numeral galactic alliance, dispatched envoys to Earth for talks. The Kairos Syndicate, long hidden in the dark pockets of the Orion Veil, broadcast their first official message in decades. You taught death to disappear. We wish to learn. But Earth didn't celebrate. Not yet. A single recon ship, Saber 12, was dispatched to a remote Vortex shipyard above the icy moon of Dorothan. Pilot Elenarik recorded his final pass. The dry docks still there. Hulls intact. Ships powered down but intact. Dozens of dreadnoughts floating in perfect alignment. He paused. No crew. Not one signal. No heat, no trace life. Just the vessels, like they left in a hurry or never arrived. He hovered there for a moment, speechless. It's like they built a fleet and then vanished before they could crew it. Boss watched the footage in silence. The ships were still there, but the war in many ways was already over. The war was over, though no one had officially declared it. There were no surrender documents, no flags lowered or treaties signed, just absence. Absence of Dominion fleets, of enemy transmissions, of destruction. The galaxy had gone quiet, not from peace, but from exhaustion. And now Earth's leaders were arguing over what to do with the weapon that ended it all. The chamber beneath Geneva's reconstruction sector echoed with raised voices and urgent speculation. A circular table lit with overlapping holograms showed orbital charts, displacement field schematics, and the last operational status report from Project Eventide. It pulsed in slow, rhythmic intervals, like a sleeping heart. The weapon is still operational, stated Admiral Renwick, fingers interlaced in front of him. The Vorthax threat may be gone, but others will come. We can't afford to be defenseless. Voss leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. It's not a defense system. It's an existential razor blade pointed at the galaxy. Exactly, Renwick said. That's deterrence. Now, that's instability. The room fell into an uneasy silence. Voss stood, walking to the edge of the projection table, staring down at the glowing mock-up of Olympus Mons. The model still showed the heat signature of the generator buried beneath its crust. We built it because we had no other option. We used it because the alternative was extinction, he said, voice calm but firm. But keeping it operational sends the wrong message. One of the civilian councillors leaned forward. What message is that, Dr. Voss? Manhook the mutant tomb watchers fight to survive, he said. That now we exist to threaten. He paused, letting that sit. We don't need a world-ending button every time someone talks too loud. Murmurs rippled around the table. A second admiral raised a tentative objection, some hypothetical about rogue states and potential black market weaponization, but the momentum had shifted. The final vote passed by a narrow but decisive margin. Project Eventide was to be decommissioned. The disassembly began at dawn. On Mars, Olympus Mons was closed to all non-essential personnel. Engineering crews in thermal suits descended through the shaft, their boots echoing against the inner metal scaffold as they moved past layers of fused basalt, ceramic shielding, and decaying quantum dampeners. The heart of Eventide, the core lattice that had once vibrated space into folding, was still warm when they reached it. The lead engineer looked up at the massive structure, reverent and cautious. They didn't talk much. Some things didn't need words. It took 17 hours to fully deactivate the primary containment field, 2 weeks more to unbolt the lattice and coil suppressors. When they extracted the central array, the team paused for a moment, half in awe, half in fear, as if they weren't sure whether removing it would wake something sleeping. It didn't. On Earth, messages flooded in from across known space. Not official communiques, those would take years of rebuilding trust, but small, human things. A recorded tribute from the Etrexians, a short poetic verse from the Sihari Collective, and a strange, beautiful sculpture sent via automated drone by the Omari Spiral. One message arrived, encrypted but unguarded, a direct transmission from a minor species once thought too primitive for interstellar contact. They identified themselves as the Beliari. Their words were simple. You fought with silence. You frightened gods with illusions. You were not the empire with the biggest ships. You were the empire that fought with shadows. It was signed simply, with hope, from the free. Voss walked the now empty corridors of the Olympus Mons facility with Kess at his side. The place felt colder without the generator humming beneath their feet. They passed dark labs, sealed control rooms, dust gathering in corners where engineers once sweated through midnight simulations. I forgot what silence sounded like, Kess murmured. They stopped outside the now sealed test chamber. No lights, no surveillance feed, just the bare metal bulkhead with a single engraved placard. Eventide. Deactivated. We built a ghost, she said quietly, and gave it teeth. Voss stared at the door. For a long time he didn't speak. Then, I wonder if it ever really existed at all. She smiled faintly. It existed where it needed to. They turned back down the hallway, their footsteps the only sound. Hours later, alone in the decommissioning bay, Voss stood before the last of the core modules. It sat dormant, encased in reinforced shielding, awaiting transport to a deep vault far beneath Greenland's northern shelf. He rested his palm against the casing. It was cool now. Dead. Not from failure, but by choice. Technician moved to lock the final seal. Voss didn't look at him. Sometimes, he said, barely above a whisper, power is knowing when to stop. The seal closed with a soft click. The war was over. Officially, it had no name. No banners were flown, no holidays declared. The Vorthax Dominion hadn't signed a surrender because there was no one left coherent enough to surrender. They had simply unraveled. A war without a final battle, a collapse without a formal end. But the galaxy remembered. Earth's diplomatic channels reopened cautiously, as if testing for aftershocks. But what trickled in wasn't accusation, it was invitation. The Oleran Confederacy, neutral for nearly a century, extended a formal alliance pact. The Kryn protectorates offered access to their trade routes in exchange for shared ghost defense protocols. Even the aloof Travasi enclave, who had once mocked humanity's volatility, sent an envoy bearing a single question. How did you do it? The answer wasn't found in battle reports. It was pieced together by people like Malin Dar, a Terran historian with a penchant for contradictions. Her work, Phantom Doctrine, The Collapse of the Vorthax, became required reading in every interstellar diplomacy program within 5 years. She wrote not of tactical superiority or technological dominance, but of something else. It wasn't brute force that broke the Vorthax. It was imagination, weaponized. A war won not by what was done, but by what they feared might be done. She described a species that taught the galaxy a new kind of warfare, not domination but distortion. Earth, she wrote, had redefined conflict with an idea, and once an empire loses control of its own narrative, the body follows the mind. In a vault beneath the ruins of a Vorthax citadel, scavengers recovered a fractured data core, blackened, partially melted, but still humming with fragments. Among the salvaged information, a final message played from an anonymous Dominion tactician. The voice, though distorted, spoke with perfect clarity. Do not provoke the humans. They do not follow the rules. They erase them. That recording would later appear in over a dozen diplomatic briefings, cited as one of the few moments of honesty the Vorthax ever admitted. And yet, while Earth rose cautiously in influence, its name now spoken with a mix of respect and apprehension, Rylan Vos disappeared from public life. He turned down awards, declined advisory roles, ignored interview requests. Some believed he'd been sequestered by intelligence agencies. Others said he'd gone off-world entirely, but the truth was quieter. He lived alone, in a modest dwelling carved into the side of a low-gravity cliff on Europa's dark face, where the sunlight barely touched. There, he wrote, not a memoir, not a defense. But his manuscript, never submitted, was titled Theoretical Ethics of Weaponized Uncertainty. He knew no publisher would touch it. That wasn't the point. He wasn't writing for recognition. He was writing because some thoughts couldn't stay unspoken. In the final lines, scribbled in uneven strokes as the ice shifted above his roof, he left a conclusion meant for no one, or everyone. The deadliest weapon isn't the one that destroys. It's the one that leaves them wondering if it ever existed at all. What do you think is more powerful, fear of the unknown or force you can see? If Earth fought with shadows, what would you have done in the Vorthax place? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story left a mark, hit that subscribe button for more HFY tales. Don't forget to like, comment, and share, because sometimes the scariest thing is knowing we haven't even shown them our best trick.